Hi, and welcome to the Scientistsage Sangha. And tonight we are going to talk about people pleasing. I am Nancy Anderson Dolan from Wise Heart Wellness, and I'm so glad you joined us tonight. This is going to be an interesting topic. I was just talking with people that are live on the call before we started, and lots of interesting takes on this. And I want to give you some sort of definition, but there's so many different ones. And I'm going to give some general ideas and some examples and that kind of thing. It's really doing or not doing something because you are thinking about how someone else will react to it. And we'll go further on that. And it's compared to walking on eggshells. So that term is used when you're afraid you're going to set somebody else off or set in motion a train of events that you don't want to experience. And you literally defer to others. It might be as simple as saying, well, I don't care what movie we see or where we eat dinner, or it might be as complicated as literally not speaking up about anything. And sometimes it's not knowing ourselves well enough to know what we want. And so it's very hard to not be people pleasing because we just keep deferring to other people. And we don't take the time to be present enough to know. And sometimes it's like being emotionally reactive. We're afraid that somebody might, put down our choice or be unkind about something or disregard us entirely, saying, I'd like to go over here to this restaurant. And they're saying, oh no, we'll go to this one. So discarding our input, all sorts of things. And this comes from a place of so many different things, and it's different in different people. Some people are literally trained into it. We were talking earlier about our cultural things that make us not speak up and tell us basically that if there's something amiss, maybe we should just back up and keep it to ourselves and put up and shut up kind of thing. And it comes from things like trauma. When people have been traumatized, they don't want to feel in danger again. And so that it doesn't even necessarily come up as a conscious choice. It just feels to be safe, I need to be quiet and not stand out from the crowd, not stand up for what I want. And we often go about getting our needs met in ways that are not very healthy then, when we're not just directly asking for what we need and even caring about what we need. And so the other parts of it, things like media projections, and the media will, sort of say you have to look this way, be this way, do this thing to really get what you want. And they also define what you want. And so that sort of thing, finding out what it is that we want and what we want to be doing and speak up about it, it's a real wound for us when we don't get to speak up. And so we're going to talk a lot about the different causes and situations in that. But what we're going to talk about as well is how incredibly resistant people pleasing is to change. And even if we really want to change it, we have to do some really conscious work around that. Because let's start first with all intentions to please people aren't bad. To navigate relationships, we have to be wanting to please people. To not our species be surviving this long, we had to be in tribes and please people. That's how we find mates. It's not a bad thing overall. It is this process that we get into about feeling that we have to control things outside of us by manipulating other people's experience of us. And that becomes problematic. And so the ideas about that, there are ways to change it. I'll just tell people that up front after when we go into the other complicated way it unfolds. There are ways. Literally, the first step is becoming aware of the patterns. And because they can be quite unique and quite convoluted and quite justified. So actually becoming aware of the patterns is job one. And uncovering the emotions and thoughts that weave the patterns into us, like literally bone deep, society deep. And then focusing attention on the things that trigger them, that trigger that response, and what outcomes they're creating. And then the last is really having that information going forward, doing deliberate practice. And often it's just one little step. Okay, when somebody gives me a compliment, here's what I'll say. Or when somebody says, what do you want to do tonight? I will actually take a moment and think about what I want to do tonight and say it no matter what their reaction is. I can help myself move through other people's reactions to me, good or bad. So having just those 3 steps. Now, it sounds pretty simple, not so much. So I'm going to talk more about that because whatever we repeat, our brain rewires. So if we keep doing the same thing, it gets wired in harder and harder and harder. And so most of us have been doing some sort of people pleasing for a long time. And that safety kinds of things, safety patterns are way harder to change than other, just unconscious patterns, things that don't mean so much, like, oh, I put the knives on the right and you put them on the left. Yeah, that's not as hard to change as something like, oh, I shouldn't say this idea to this person because I know it'll make them angry, so I'm not going to talk about this, or not talk about this desire because people make fun of me for it. And so those safety triggers are really important to watch for. But first, I'm going to talk to you about Michael Singer. He wrote a book called The Untethered Soul, and now has a book out talking about living untethered, and a number of other books about surrender, things like that. He has the most amazing story metaphor about people pleasing. He talks about a bird that is flying along and then lands, and it ends up in a deep puddle, and it flails around and it can't get out, and it tires out, and it just sort of sits there, and the water is being blown by the wind, and it's feeling it, and it just is too tired to do anything anymore. And then the rain stops and it starts to get a little better, and now the bird has forgotten now that it can get out because it was such a horrendous storm that it got stuck. And then it starts to flap its wings a little bit, and it finds out that the waves are moving away from it. It's no longer engulfing it. And then it starts to sing a little bit, and the water isn't quite so high, so it can move a little more safely. And it comes to believe that by doing those things, it has caused this change in circumstance. So the bird doesn't try and fly away because he believes that he can't. But he does keep flapping his wings and making birdsong because he thinks that makes it better. So when the next storm comes, the rain comes down again and the water goes up and the bird is struggling again. Well, he starts doing the things that he thought made it get better, but it's not making it get better anymore. And he's flailing around and he's getting more and more exhausted and distressed. And then the rain stops and it starts to get better again. And he's just sure that all those things that he'd done, that flailing around and everything, got this to happen. And so you can see this mirrors us in our minds. We believe that the things we have done have made it better. And it's worse if it makes it more comfortable in any given moment, because then it becomes cemented in that pathway that says, this is a safety behavior. And we rank that one up here on the list of things to do. And so we look at that and we get those weird associations with different behaviors there when they might actually be the complete opposite. But when it's happened enough for us, when we have had any kind of good result, especially a good result when we're in a difficult feeling, okay, we don't want to feel uncomfortable, then we do those things over and over again. So we can sit in those ripples that are caused by other people, or we can cause our own ripples, basically. And we don't have to flail, but we have to be aware about when we flail. So he talks about one of the things that we do is we like people to say nice things about us. Because when our brain hears people say nice things about us, it has a very happy response in there, just like an addict does to their substance. Our brain goes, oh, this is great. What was I doing when that happened? Let me figure it out. And then we go along and we want to do that again because it makes our brain so happy and kind of quiet. All the other stuff is back here for a while, and that prefrontal cortex is bathing in those pretty words. And we want that to happen over and over. So we try and go and do that, but we know that doesn't always work that well. And Sydney Smith from Adventures with Poseidon in Wellness, it was the article in the email this week, talks about even when we see somebody else in emotional discomfort, we want to help them because their emotional discomfort causes us emotional discomfort. And so now we're like, wait a minute, if I can please them and they settle down, I will feel better. This is great. I've got the key. And so we start looking in that sort of thing, and causes those waves. We start to flail a little bit, and we want to help them. And this reaction is experienced more intensely depending on how we have been emotionally wounded or abandoned. Because if we have been abandoned in our distress, we're very sensitive to that with other people. And we want to step in and help them. And like I say, these things are not bad things, and they don't come from bad places all the time. They are just some normal things amped up on this other experience. And we literally develop attachment disorders in this way, desperately trying to please a person that may even become abusive to us, because we're so sure that we can make this change if we just are people pleasing enough. And that, because that state of mind tricks us even into thinking that this is helpful to them. And especially if the other person is saying, if you would just be like this, then we'll think, I will be helpful. I will be like that. And that state of mind determines what we feel and do. So our mind literally tricks us, and we become more desperate to control that incoming information. So we don't want those people angry with us, because that means we're not being successful. And so the combination of those things that we're thinking and the distress we feel in our bodies is a huge, huge pull to do certain behaviors. And another, what Sydney calls a wound, another wound, not the wound of getting confused about getting out of the puddle. There's that one to start with. Another one is that we start avoiding our emotions, and we have fears and self-judgment, and it all winds up, and the people call it the shadow, the things that we haven't processed, things we haven't looked at, things we hide in the dark. And that shadow literally makes us want to not be like that and be like this. So we're not being ourselves, not that our kindness isn't how we want to be, but it's based on being fueled by these fears and judgments and things inside of us, rather just that, not than that heart connection that just, oh, I want to help you. Because that heart connection notices when our helping isn't helpful to another person, and it notices when we go too far for our own selves. And so we may want to help every child in the world that is hungry, but we know we can't. So we might help the children in our neighborhood, or we might have a foster child overseas, or there's things we can do with that, but we're not burning out about it. So then there is this idea that all these shadow things live in us, and we're afraid of judgment and things. And that becomes this experience that I was saying I just had today as I was paying attention to all the people pleasing, where I was thinking about how other possible people that don't exist actually, but they might have thoughts about me, and that affecting behavior that I might take on. And so that shadow is a real force in our lives. And it's not even real people. There are not real people in the room. I'm not referring to actual real people, just these phantom people that interestingly have a lot of the fears and judgments that I have of myself. So that tells us it's not going to be okay. And that feeling, we are trying more and more frantically to manipulate things, our feelings, what other people are thinking about us, what we are thinking, other people are thinking. So, and it just escalates and escalates like that bird in the puddle in a big storm. And so the only way to heal this is to recognize that wound and have some sort of expanded acceptance. And that depends on how we're going to come to it, what happens. But we can allow in more room, okay? The spiritual, the energetic, the higher self, the super conscious, just the peace of mind, somewhere beyond all these mechanisms that are happening in our mind, okay? And that's what people did in vision quests, or when they use psychedelics. Their minds literally expand beyond the current state. It's also what often good therapy does. Now, talk therapy, and I have been a talk therapist for a long time, but talk therapy is not the fastest way to do this. Being in your body is way faster. Having the presence of mind to just breathe when you feel that little oddness, when you are thinking about, oh, I'd love to do this, but what would people say? Like, wait a minute, just a minute, there's something there I should pay attention to. And just sit down and literally breathe and open up. When you do the simple breathing, about a 6-count breathing, your brain moves from incoherence to coherence. And that coherence is what gets us out of people pleasing. And so the idea is about calming your body, doing breath work. People might do somatic release that just helps their body relax, but relaxing is really useful. And we can relax whether we recognize it or not, because most of us have some sort of people-pleasing behavior. So we can literally just assume that and practice relaxing and see what comes out. And when we're in a difficult situation, we can, and it might be afterwards, like, why didn't I say I really didn't want to see that movie? Or why didn't I say that I really wanted that job when, it came up at work? We can download that and work with it, create this space, see what the emotion is that's there. Those things where we are people pleasing when we don't want to be are jewels. There are pathways out of this. So it's really useful. I have a personal checklist. It's in the email if you want to go through it more thoroughly. But when I have a fear behavior, I look around and I go, what am I afraid? And how am I altering my behavior? And that's one of the ways. Overwhelm. When I'm overwhelmed, I feel like I just can't pull it together to do anything except what somebody else wants me to do. So if I have a state of overwhelm going on, if I'm too fatigued to navigate relationships effectively, when I'm being dishonest, it's almost always because I'm fearful in some way. And it may be, a very direct thing to people pleasing, or it may have something a little more convoluted, because otherwise I will say to somebody, oh, you know what? I didn't speak, what I really thought about that. Here's what I think, unless I'm people pleasing. So if I'm being dishonest, it's a good place to look. Disconnection. If I feel disconnected from somebody, if I have sort of left the room while I'm still talking to them, then I know that I'm having some issue with people pleasing. The feeling of desperation, like I need this person to think this way about me, and that's a problem. Or think this way about a topic that I believe in, then I'm people pleasing. I want this to be like this. I can't have a conversation back and forth with someone who has a different opinion if I am really, I'm not being honest about what I want or need, and I'm trying to pull them over to my point of view by manipulating them, by people pleasing. You can see how confusing this can get, because it gets that way in our minds. When I'm feeling really lonely, I might be people pleasing. And people often get into that, and we'll discuss about how they got there. And it was, I just felt so lonely. I saw all the red flags. I don't agree with this person. We don't get along well, but I just felt so lonely. And there's some more down here, but I'm going to cut that short because I'd like to just do a little contemplation right now. And what I'm going to have you do is just Pick up something that you might have been people pleasing in. It might have been today, or it might have been a while ago. It might even be back from childhood. It doesn't matter. But just get a little idea about it in your mind and entertain the idea of sitting and sifting this. Okay? So it is not about finding out exactly why it happened. It's about, what am I feeling right now, remembering it? What am I feeling remembering it? Maybe I feel like a little child looking for attention. Maybe I just feel really angry. Or maybe I feel threatened. And just sit. You can close your eyes if you want to. What this does is build up our ability to tolerate these feelings, to face these feelings. And you may want to comfort yourself in some way, putting your hands on your chest, or holding a pillow in front of you, or putting a sweater on, or stretching, taking a deep breath. And just feel, what does the energy of people pleasing feel like for you? It could even be, you could be like me, a mom that wanted to please her children. I can tell you that felt pretty desperate sometimes. I might have felt like I needed them to be quiet or happy with something I did for them. And it was very different than coming from a place of sort of joyful giving, where I could happily go off to the park with them and enjoy them. And when I took them to the park, to get them to leave me alone, get them to say, Mommy, yes, we like this. Yes, we want to do that. Those kinds of things. Whenever I'm trying to get a response from someone, I can fall into people pleasing. And just notice the energy as you relax and move out of that sort of manipulative energy. You might even see what you were doing as humorous. Or perhaps just not effective. Often when we fall into an addictive loop of pleasing people, getting the reward in our brain, and then being willing to sacrifice more and more to get that reward. And we train other people to count on our people pleasing. We literally get them addicted to our people pleasing. We're doing things for them, they really like it. Then we feel like we have to do more for them. And it becomes addictive in our experience. And then when we want to stop doing what we're doing for them, naturally upset. They've become accustomed to it. So you can see how tangled this can get. And I'd encourage you to take a time this week just to notice where you fall into people pleasing in your mind, by yourself, or with the presence of other people around, or particular situations. when you feel that fear or judgment or energy of manipulation, and where you can relax out of it, not condemning yourself for people pleasing, not forcing yourself to do something different right now, but just relaxing, just relaxing. And notice if you see different ways of moving forward. And if you have brave and friendly people, like the ones sitting on the call with me tonight, you might ask them how they experience people pleasing. And if you're really, really a big risk taker, you could ask them if they see you people pleasing. So I hope this has been interesting and helpful. And I hope you have some interesting times exploring this for yourself. For the people with me live, I'll let you come back at your own pace. Feel free to turn your cameras on or leave them off. And we'll have a little discussion about this. And for those of you watching later, watching this recording, thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing this exploration with us. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed day.